Ndayaku was a place where the women were known, even beyond neighboring villages, for their wide hips, round faces, and the proud sway of their heavy bodies. To be fat in Ndayaku was not just common, it was expected. It was a sign of wealth, of good upbringing, of being well taken care of. The girls were trained early. By the age of 10, mothers would slap extra handfuls of pounded yam onto their daughters' plates, pushing them toward their destiny, becoming a real woman, one with flesh that jiggled when she laughed, thighs that rubbed together when she walked. But there was one girl who stood apart, like a skinny tree in the middle of a fat forest. Obianuju. From the day she was born, people said she was different. Small, fragile, like a broomstick, Mama Ifeoma once said, clucking her tongue in pity. No matter how much her mother, Mama Agbonma, fed her, fufu soaked in thick egusi soup, bowls of boiled yam dripping with palm oil, Obianuju remained stubbornly slim, her arms as slender as cassava stems. At first, it was a joke. The wind will carry her away one day. The old women would cackle as they watched her pass. See how her bones are playing music as she walks, young boys would shout, slapping their thighs and laughing until tears ran down their faces. But jokes, like knives, have a way of cutting deeper when repeated often enough. Obianuju learned to lower her eyes when she walked. She learned to hide behind her mother's wrapper at festivals. When her mates danced the Aquanchinii, stamping their heavy feet into the dust, Obianuju stayed at the back, clapping quietly, her skinny wrists knocking together like sticks. And when she could no longer bear it, the giggles, the whispers, the looks, she did the only thing she knew. She withdrew. She stopped going to the stream. She stopped attending Umwada meetings. She stopped helping at village feasts. She hid herself inside their small house at the edge of the village, eating and eating and eating, hoping, praying, that her body would bloom like the others. Morning to night, she stuffed herself with food. Pounded yam, oha soup, beans with red oil, roasted plantains dipped in groundnut paste. She would eat until her stomach hurt, lying on the mat with tears sliding silently down her cheeks. But nothing changed. Her body stayed as it was, slim, light, rebellious. It was as if the gods themselves had cursed her. The village women grew tired of whispering and began to speak openly. If she were my daughter, Mama and Joku said loudly at the market one day, I would hide her inside the house out of shame. They laughed, and the sound burned Obianuju more deeply than any hot cooking fire. So she did hide. Days melted into weeks, weeks into months. She became a ghost in her own village, a rumor, a forgotten thing. Until the day everything changed. The news came to Ndayaku like the first crack of thunder before a heavy rain. Odogwa's son is coming back, the women shrieked at the market. The one who has been living in the city. The rich man's son, Obianuju, is returning. Mothers began scrubbing their daughters' skin till it glowed like new clay. Fathers sent their sons to sweep the compounds and slaughter fat goats for welcome feasts. Even the old men under the great Udala tree straightened their spines and dusted off their walking sticks. In Ndayaku, a returning son was no small matter, especially a son like Obianuju. He was the only son of Chief Odogwu, the wealthiest man the village had ever produced. Years ago, Chief Odogwu had left Ndayaku with nothing but a tattered bag and a stubborn spirit. He returned decades later riding in a black Peugeot, his body round with success and his pockets fat with city money. He built the first-story building in the village, a gleaming white house with iron gates and glass windows that caught the sun like diamonds. When Obianuju was born, the entire village celebrated for 3 days. Drums, dancing, palm wine that flowed like a river. And now, after many years away, schooling, traveling, growing into a man, Obianuju was returning. The women of Ndayaku whispered feverishly behind cupped palms. Maybe he will marry from the village. Maybe he will choose one of our daughters. They cooked and cleaned and prepared themselves as if they were preparing for war. Obianuju heard the excitement from her small room. The songs, the laughter, the flurry of activity that filled the air. She pressed her forehead against the cool mud wall and sighed. What did it matter to her? She was invisible, a forgotten wisp among proud, heavy bodies. No rich man's son would look twice at her. She remained in her hiding place, peeking sometimes through the small window as preparations reached a fever pitch. The day Obianuju arrived, The whole village gathered by the main road, squinting into the distance. First came the dust, rising in a furious cloud. Then, the sound of a car horn, sharp and impatient. And finally, the car itself, sleek, black, shiny, like something torn from the pages of a city magazine. When Obianuju stepped out, a gasp rippled through the crowd. He was tall, taller than any man in the village. His skin gleamed like polished mahogany, and he wore dark sunglasses that made him look even more mysterious. His shirt was crisp white, tucked neatly into expensive trousers, and his shoes shone like tiny mirrors. The women sighed. The girls fidgeted, smoothing invisible wrinkles from their wrappers. Even the old grandmothers, who had long given up hope, straightened their backs and smiled toothless smiles. Obianuju removed his glasses slowly, surveying the crowd with the cool, bored eyes of a man who had seen bigger, brighter things. He smiled, a slow, lazy smile. The village roared in welcome. Welcome, son of the soil. Welcome, lion of Ndiaku. Welcome, husband of our daughters. He bowed slightly in respect, and the women swooned. The chief's compound was turned into a palace overnight. Colorful canopies sprang up like mushrooms after rain. Drums pounded, feet stamped, and the air throbbed with life. Obianuju greeted everyone politely, his eyes lingering on the faces that passed before him. Round faces, round arms, round waists. Everywhere he turned, flesh upon flesh upon flesh. At first, he smiled to himself. It was good. It was home. But as the days went by, a small frown began to grow between his brows. The sameness pressed on him, heavy and suffocating. Where were the delicate, elegant figures he was used to seeing in the city? The models who glided across television screens? The slender women who wore dresses like second skin? It was as if Ndiaku was a village made entirely of one shape, one large, swaying shape. Still, he hid his confusion behind smiles and laughter. He was not here to mock. He was here to reconnect, to honor his father, to show respect. Yet, somewhere deep inside him, a restlessness stirred. He walked often, wandering beyond the main roads, exploring forgotten corners of the village. Sometimes, he would sit under the big mango tree by the stream, tossing stones into the water, trying to understand this strange, heavy place that had birthed him. It was on one of these lonely walks that he saw her. At first, he thought he was dreaming. A figure darted across the path ahead, quick, slim, and sure-footed. He paused, blinking against the glare of the sun. There, by the edge of the bush, stood a girl. Not like the others. She was slender, almost painfully so. Her skin was the color of ripe cashew fruit, soft, glowing, untouched by city dust. Her hair was tied back in a simple scarf, and she wore a faded wrapper that clung shyly to her small hips. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Obianuju felt the burn of his gaze and lowered her eyes, her heart pounding like the drums during New Yam festival. She turned to flee, melting into the trees like a shadow. But Obianuju stood frozen, struck dumb by what he had seen. In a village of roundness, of abundance, of heavy beauty, she was a whisper, a secret, a song almost too soft to hear. He had to find her again. He must. Obianuju could not sleep that night. The image of the slender girl haunted him, delicate and untouchable, like mist on a river. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her again, standing barefoot on the red earth, the breeze tugging gently at her wrapper. Who is she? He whispered into the darkness. He turned restlessly on the wide mattress in his father's mansion, ignoring the cool air of the ceiling fan and the faint smell of new paint on the walls. He had never seen beauty like that, not in all his years in the glittering city, not even among the elegant women at the fashion shows he sometimes attended. There was something raw about her, unpolished, pure, like finding a hidden spring in the middle of a desert. By morning, his mind was made up. He would find her. He must. The sun rose slow and lazy, pouring golden light over Ndiaku. Roosters crowed proudly, goats bleated from behind rough fences, and smoke curled into the sky from breakfast fires. Obianuju dressed carefully, a simple t-shirt and jeans, city clothes that made him stand out even more among the villagers' colorful wrappers and faded shirts. He tucked a small wad of Naira notes into his pocket, in case anyone needed encouragement to talk. He began asking questions, carefully, casually, as he moved from compound to compound. At first, The villagers thought he was looking for a wife. You want a wife, eh? Mama Njoku chuckled, clapping her doughy hands. Come and see my daughter. Strong like yam. She can bear you plenty sons. Obianuju smiled politely and shook his head. No, not just any girl, he said. I'm looking for someone different. That word, different, puzzled them. Different? What was wrong with their round, healthy daughters? Frustrated, he changed his tactic. The slim girl, he said finally. The very slim one. I saw her near the bush path. At that, the women exchanged knowing looks. Some clicked their tongues. Some laughed harshly. Ah, that one. Mama Ifioma said, waving a hand dismissively. Obianuju, the one that refuses to be fat. The broomstick. Leave that one. Biko, Mama Attica chimed in, adjusting the wrapper around her sagging waist. She is not fit for marriage. She will disgrace you in front of your city friends. Obianuju felt anger flare in his chest, but he swallowed it down. Please, he said calmly. Where does she live? Reluctantly, they pointed toward the far end of the village, beyond the main compounds, where the trees grew thicker and the houses were fewer. There, they said. The last compound before the footpath to the river. She hardly comes out. You will be wasting your time. But Obianuju was already walking, his long legs eating up the dusty path. Obianuju sat inside the dark hut, weaving palm fronds into small mats. Her mother had gone to the market, and the house was silent except for the soft, rhythmic sound of weaving. When she heard footsteps crunching on the path outside, she stiffened. No one visited them anymore. No one wanted to be associated with the thin curse, as some villagers had cruelly whispered. She peeked through a crack in the door, and her heart leapt into her throat. It was him, the rich man's son, the one who had seen her. She scrambled back, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Obianuju paused outside the door, uncertain for the first time in many years. What was he doing? What was he supposed to say? Before he could lose his courage, he lifted his hand and knocked gently. Nwanyoma, beautiful girl, are you there? Silence. I won't harm you, he said softly. I just want to talk. Still, she did not answer. But Obianuju was patient. He sat down on the small wooden bench outside her hut, stretching his legs out in front of him. He waited and waited. Hours passed, the sun climbing high and hot. The village children ran by, laughing and chasing each other. The women carried heavy baskets on their heads. Life moved around him, but Obianuju stayed rooted, a stubborn city tree in village soil. Finally, as the shadows lengthened and the heat softened into a golden hum, the door creaked open. Slowly, cautiously, Obianuju stepped out, her wrapper tied tightly around her thin body, her bare feet hesitant on the packed earth. She looked even smaller up close. Obianuju stood up quickly, brushing dust from his jeans. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he smiled, a slow, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I am Obianuju, he said, bowing slightly. Obianuju blinked, confused by his gentleness. I am Obianuju, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Obianuju, he repeated, tasting the name. It suits you. Full of life, even if you do not carry it on your body. Her cheeks burned. No one had ever spoken of her like that. Not with mockery, not with pity, but with wonder. Obianuju sat back down and patted the bench beside him. Sit, please, he said. Slowly, cautiously, Obianuju sat. For a long time, they just talked. About nothing. About everything. About the village, about the city. About rivers and trees and dreams. Obianuju found herself laughing. A soft, musical sound she had forgotten she possessed. Obianuju found himself leaning closer, hungry for more of her quiet light. As the first stars winked open in the sky, he knew, deep in his bones, that he had found something rare, something precious, something worth fighting for. In a village that worshipped heaviness, he had found grace, and he would not let it slip through his fingers. The next days in Diaku were days of scandal. Obianuju, the rich man's son, the pride of the village, the dream of every mother, had chosen to spend his time with Obianuju, the slim, shy girl who was all but forgotten. The news spread like wildfire. Women gossiped while pounding yam. Men shook their heads in disbelief under the udala tree. What is he thinking? Is it by slimness that a woman makes a home? That girl has no weight. She will be blown away by city breeze. But Obianuju did not care. Every morning, He would leave his father's compound, ignoring the questioning eyes and whispered judgments, and walk to the far end of the village. There, under the shade of the mango tree beside Obianuju's small hut, they would sit, talking, laughing, sometimes simply watching the wind dance in the tall grasses. At first, Obianuju was frightened. Surely this was a game. Surely he would grow tired and leave. She had seen how the world treated her, first with laughter, then with silence. Why should this rich, beautiful man be different? But day after day he returned, sometimes bringing gifts. A sweet mango, a tiny mirror from the city, a pair of simple leather slippers. Never anything too grand, nothing that would embarrass her. Just small tokens, wrapped in kindness. Slowly, against her own battered heart, Obianuju began to believe. But not everyone was pleased. Obianuju's mother, a heavy-set woman with tired eyes, pulled her aside one evening. "Inini," she said, her voice sharp. "Stop seeing that boy. He is playing with you." Obianuju lowered her eyes. "Mama, he is kind to me," she whispered. Her mother scoffed. "Kindness does not fill a stomach," she snapped. "Listen to me. Men like him, rich men, they want wives who can sit on a throne, not girls who look like dry sticks." Tears burned behind Obianuju's eyes. "He is different, Mama," she said softly. Her mother looked at her for a long moment, something like sadness passing over her face. "Pray he stays different, my daughter," she murmured. "Pray he does not change like the others." The pressure on Obianuju mounted too. His father, Chief Odigwu, summoned him one night into the big parlor filled with heavy leather chairs and photographs of their ancestors. "My son," the chief began, swirling palm wine in his calabash. "What is this I hear about you chasing a broomstick around the village?" Obianuju smiled quietly. "Father, her heart is wide enough to shelter nations," he said. "What do I care for the size of her waist?" The chief frowned. "Marriage is not just for love," he said. "Marriage is for strength, for pride, for building a house that others will fear and respect." Obianuju stood, squaring his shoulders. "Then let me build a house of true happiness, not false pride," he said. "Let me marry the one who makes my heart dance." Chief Odigwu watched him for a long time. Then, slowly, he smiled. A small, grudging smile. "You are your father's son," he said, stubborn to the bone. And so, permission was given, though not without heavy sighs and wagging tongues. The day of the marriage was unlike any Diaku had ever seen. There was no long parade of fat daughters in glittering wrappers. No endless displays of heavy, glistening jewelry. Instead, there was a simple, beautiful ceremony under the giant Udala tree. Obianuju stood tall in his white city clothes. Obianuju wore a plain cream dress that floated around her like mist, her hair woven in thin, delicate braids that shone in the sun. When she walked toward him, the villagers fell silent. For the first time, they saw her clearly, not as the skinny, laughable girl, but as something rare and breathtaking. A flower that had bloomed despite the weight of mocking rain. When Obianuju slipped the simple gold ring onto her finger, there were tears in many eyes, though pride would not let most admit it. They left Ndiaku 2 days later, in a black SUV that swallowed the dusty road behind them. Obianuju clutched Obianuju's hand tightly as they drove, staring wide-eyed at the endless stretch of tarred road, at the rising skyline of the distant city. In the months that followed, she grew. Not in body. No, her frame remained slender, graceful. But in spirit, in confidence. Obianuju encouraged her to pursue her natural beauty, to see it not as a curse, but as a gift. He introduced her to a modeling agency, where she quickly rose to fame. Her delicate frame, her glowing skin, her soft, shy smile. She was different, and the city adored difference. Within a year, Obianuju became a sought-after model, gracing billboards and magazines. Her name, once whispered in scorn, was now printed in bold letters. She bought a bright red car with her first major paycheck, not out of vanity, but because she wanted the villagers of Ndiaku to hear her return before they saw it. In return she did. One fine Harmattan afternoon, a thick cloud of dust rose at the village gates as Obianuju's car sped in. Children screamed and chased after her. Women dropped their firewood bundles in shock. Obianuju stepped out of the car, tall, poised, wrapped in a flowing dress that kissed her ankles. Her skin glowed, her eyes sparkled. The same villagers who had once mocked her now rushed to greet her. Obianuju, our daughter, our pride. She smiled graciously, hugging the old women, laughing with the young men. But she had not come only to show her success. She had come to lift others. She gathered the slim girls, the shy, the overlooked, the mocked, and brought them together under the Udala tree. I will take you to the city, she said, her voice strong. I will show you that you are beautiful, just as you are. Some cried. Some knelt and kissed her feet. Obianuju lifted them up with her own hands. No more bowing, she said. Stand tall. The world will bow to your spirit. And so, the girl once hidden behind mud walls became the torchbearer for those who had been hidden too long. Under the open sky of Ndiakwu, surrounded by the same hills that had once boxed her in, Obianuju smiled. She had not grown heavy like the others wished. She had not bent under their laughter. She had bloomed, not despite their scorn, but because of it. And now, she was not just a girl. She was a movement, a song, a flag planted firmly in the red earth, declaring for all to hear. I am enough.